On Tuesday morning, the Indian Army announced that 3 of its personnel, 1 officer, and 2 soldiers died during a violent face-off with the Chinese army in Ladakh's Galwan Valley on Monday night. It later said that an additional 17 Indian troops who were injured in the line of duty at the standoff location and exposed to sub-zero temperatures in the high-altitude terrain have succumbed to their injuries. As of Tuesday midnight, at the time of this recording, the death toll is 20. It's the first such loss of life along the disputed India-China border in at least the last 45 years and comes during a buildup of troops by both nations along the border. In its statement, the Indian Army said it was firmly committed to protect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the nation. We've previously looked at the current India-China border dispute in a few episodes, and the links are provided in the description of today's episode. We're also going to analyze this development soon. Now, on to today's episode. Hi, I'm Arun George, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In today's episode, we're looking at a new test that aims to detect the spread of COVID-19 faster and at a lower cost. We're also looking at a scam in Uttar Pradesh involving multiple people who claim to be the same Anamika Shukla. But first, we're looking at the reimposition of a lockdown in the city of Chennai and surrounding districts to curb the spread of COVID-19. When there were reports last week that the Tamil Nadu government was planning to reimpose a lockdown, Chief Minister K. Palaniswamy said they were false news. On Monday, the government declared an intense lockdown was going to be imposed in Chennai and 3 neighboring districts from the 19th of June to the 30th of June. The decision prompted the chief ministers of Delhi and Gujarat to deny that they were planning anything similar. Officials in Tamil Nadu said that only essential medical services, private vehicles for emergency use, government offices, banks, and shops selling essential items will be allowed to function during the latest lockdown. There will be a complete lockdown in these areas on the 21st of June and 28th of June, both of which are Sundays. The Chief Minister also announced cash support of 1,000 rupees for everyone with ration cards in the 4 areas during the lockdown. We're now speaking with Arun Janardhanan, who covers the state of Tamil Nadu for the Indian Express, about what prompted the state to take this decision at a time when other states are attempting to increase economic activity. So Arun, could you start by telling us the situation in Chennai presently and how it's handling the pandemic?
The situation in Chennai is, there is a clear spike in the number of cases. Chennai alone has some 33,000 cases right now and about 382 deaths reported. This is besides some 200 deaths they allegedly covered up or missed to report. So that death audit is still happening. So officially it is 382 deaths. So Chennai situation is quite alarming. The government also is considering the fact that, the kind of population and the relaxed lockdown norms, the city was slowly getting back to normal. The only exception was that, there were no public transport, the public transport government buses and metro and suburban rail services. Other than these 3 services, Chennai was almost back to normal. So that is the reason, the cases are steadily going up. So that is the reason why they have declared a 12-day lockdown from 19th. So this 12 days lockdown, still we do not know the logic of lockdown, whether it will really help to arrest the spread or it will only help to delay the outbreak. Anyway, the lockdowns will definitely help the government to prepare better. So now the government system, the Chennai City Corporation is busy with expanding their bed facilities, quarantine bed facilities. And also they have brought a lot of doctors from other districts to Chennai. And they brought in a lot of ambulances, a lot of things. So Chennai situation is like Chennai maybe Mumbai or Delhi in another 2 weeks.
So how has the Chief Minister, justified the fact that it's become the first state to bring back a lockdown?
See, the declaration of lockdown is all about a strategy. It is all about whether you fight the outbreak with a lockdown or some other measures. So there are 2 school of thoughts. One is that you go for a lockdown so that people will sit at home. The markets and roads and other such places will not be crowded. Other kind of argument is that you educate people with a regular routine dose of information, communication to make them aware of the kind of social isolation or the self-isolation all these hand washing, mask wearing, all that. So Tamil Nadu government decided to go for a lockdown. So I believe it is not only about arresting the pandemic, but the spread of cases, but it is also about that kind of time they are further buying to prepare.
And what's been the reaction to this? I mean, is there any opposition to this decision given people are just emerging from the lockdown?
No, actually, people, when there were speculations that, there will be a lockdown again, it was not a surprise for people because daily they are watching news and, they are knowing that, things are happening. But at the same time, what was surprising is when these speculations broke out last week, the government denied it. The chief minister said that it is a false news, and he even threatened that there will be a stern action against people who spread such rumor. And within 3-4 days, he had to announce the lockdown. So it could be either a false estimate, like a wrong briefing that he got. Maybe ministers or senior bureaucrats tried to tell him that, everything is under control, and later they had to correct it. Or it could be also a strategy of the government to spread a rumor first and then deny it, and then again keep doing things that is leading to that point, and then finally declare it. So that will also help in many things, because when there was a rumor that Chennai may face a lockdown, there was kind of an exodus from Chennai to other districts. So Tamil Nadu government, other district collectors reportedly told the government that, they are facing a crisis because a lot of people are coming back. So other districts in Tamil Nadu have almost contained the outbreak last month itself. There were many districts without any single new case. There were many districts who had almost treated all the COVID cases they had. But again, when the people started going from Chennai, that include all classes like lower and middle and upper middle class people, they all started going back to Coimbatore or Trichy or all these places where things are relatively better, or even their own villages. So this had put the government in a serious trouble. The checkposts leading out of Chennai, where they faced a lot of trouble. The policemen are struggling because many people have left without passes. Because in Tamil Nadu, you need passes to cross the district borders. So people have started kind of we cannot say it is an exodus, but still hundreds of people started leaving. So maybe that is also a reason that they are not really putting it in such a way. But all are experiments, I understand, the kind of statements, the change in strategies, the kind of reactions, the denial of community transmission. So all these are, I think, experiments before the governments right now, not knowing how to communicate, how to convey the message. They really don't have the courage to tell people that, this is going to happen, that the cases are going to increase. They are reluctant to do that. At the same time, there are political reasons, maybe like they don't want to say that there are so many deaths, because it is a matter of kind of a false pride for them to say that our death rate is low and our cases are few. So these kind of a complex of reasons are leading to these kind of confusing statements that are coming from the government.
So while Chennai is going to face a lockdown for the next 2 weeks, the rest of the state is just going to function normally, like there's nothing, no restrictions anywhere else?
That is what happening now, because after the lockdown norms were lifted, Chennai was still under more restrictions, while other places, other districts where public transportation started with some 50% strength of the fleets. And there were more relaxations for shops, industries, all that. So obviously, Chennai is going to be in lockdown, continue to be in lockdown, while other places will be little relaxed, the norms.
So in cities like Delhi and Mumbai, there have been complaints about difficulty in just getting a hospital bed for a patient. Is that a scenario that's being faced in Chennai or Tamil Nadu yet?
According to official status, whatever they are asserting again and again, especially in Chennai city, some 30% of beds in government hospitals are still vacant. And they keep on expanding it. They're opening more blocks, more wards in the hospitals. And also they have asked many private medical colleges, etc., to start doing their duty as part of this larger fight against the pandemic. But still, we can see a lot of cases, individual cases, where people are struggling to find a bed, people who have to wait for 1 or 2 days, people who need to call up someone. You need to call up somebody with a power, somebody with an influence. Let it be a journalist or a policeman or a minister or MLA, whoever it is. So ordinary people, I mean, there are a lot of admissions happening, a lot of people are getting treated, recovery is happening, all that is happening. While we can also see some individual cases of people are really facing a very traumatic situation of being left out, having no options. Even there are cases I heard where people are calling hospital owners directly and still unable to get help. But the government hospitals where situation is better, at least now, the situation is maybe changing by end of this month when the cases are going to really go up. But now 30% they are saying that the beds are available and that they are expanding more.
The Indian Council for Medical Research has approved a new diagnostic kit to test for COVID-19. We're now speaking with Karishma Mehrotra, who reported on the decision to introduce the rapid antigen detection test, about its advantages and how it's expected to help. Could you start by explaining the antigen test that's been approved now and the RT-PCR test?
Sure. So this is a new detection test called the rapid antigen detection test. The way in which it's similar to RT-PCR is they're both diagnostic tests. That means that if you have or do not have the virus, that's what it's intended to give a result for. That's, different from another category of tests called antibody tests. And antibody tests only determine whether you have had the virus previously. So they're both diagnostic tests, but they're quite different in the fact that RT-PCR tests, which are still sort of called the gold standard of COVID testing, are quite expensive and they do require a lot of heavy laboratory work. Whereas this rapid antigen detection test is much cheaper to facilitate. It can be facilitated at the site of the testing. So if that's a hospital or even it could be a household, it doesn't have to be transferred and it probably shouldn't be transferred to a lab. So those are the big distinctions. And because India is very much trying to ramp up testing, it is looking for ways in which it can scale. And so this would help the country scale testing. One of the things to keep in mind is that even though it's faster and cheaper, it does have some accuracy problems, which is sort of why they've laid out a different protocol for this test. So the test has a higher chance of false negatives. And the reason for this is an RT-PCR test, it amplifies whatever amount of virus there is in the sample. And so then it can more accurately find the virus. Whereas in this antigen test, it's not amplifying the amount of virus. So whatever amount of virus is in that sample, it's dependent on that. So that means that if it tests a person and they might not have that much of the virus in them, it's something we call viral load. So if the viral load is very low, this test might not detect that. So there are higher chances of false negatives. So a negative result of this test would require the RT-PCR test to reconfirm that negative. However, if there's a positive result, then that's pretty surefire to be a positive result. So that is considered a confirmed positive COVID case if this test is positive.
So is this conducted the same way as the RT-PCR, which is through a nasal swab, or is this any different?
Yes, this is also through a nasal swab, so it's similar in that sense. But like I said, the main differences are that once you take that swab, you're not supposed to transfer it to a laboratory far away. You're supposed to do the testing on site.
So why has ICMR approved this test now? I mean, you mentioned the fact that it's less labor intensive, it's faster and even more cost effective. But what is this expected to do and where is it expected to be used now?
So they're specifically focusing on two major categories where they can use this testing. One is in healthcare settings. So they have a list of the types of patients who should be tested with this test. And then the other is in containment and hotspot zones. where they're looking to test anyone who has, a high fever or cough, what we call like influenza-like illnesses, or anyone who has been in contact with the case, even if they're asymptomatic, but, if they're a very direct contact, if they're a high-risk contact, and if they themselves have comorbidities, underlying illnesses that could make that risk much more dangerous. So they've sort of categorized that. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that when you look at the testing strategy that the country and ICMR has been using, a lot of testing has gone into asymptomatic, direct, high-risk contacts of the case, which was that category I mentioned they're going to focus on with this test. So, if you look at the number of cases that we've seen between end of January to end of April, almost one-fourth of those cases are coming from this asymptomatic contact category. And 1/5 of the tests are focused on the category. So it's been such a recent scale up in this category that it makes sense to then target this category with a faster type of testing, especially for, we're going to see a lot more asymptomatic contacts of cases. And there's also an additional fear that I think they've laid out a reasoning behind this, which is there's a fear within healthcare settings of patients contracting the illness within hospitals or healthcare facilities. So they had expanded the testing strategy to include hospitalized influenza-like symptomatic patients around May 18th. Then there was, that concern of contracting the virus in hospitals. So to also target this category of hospitalized patients is meant to help, healthcare workers alleviate some of their fears of interacting with patients who they don't necessarily know to be COVID positive, but they are fearful or they're suspecting that, okay, this patient who's coming in for chemotherapy, let's say, or dialysis, there's worry that, healthcare workers might contract the virus from those operations, procedures, interventions as well.
So basically, it could make it easier for somebody who's suffering from something else and needs treatment to get that test quicker and kind of access treatment faster?
Well, to be clear, the ICMR has been very specific that no emergency procedure, including deliveries, can be delayed for lack of testing. So, we have heard stories about this, and from their protocol, it's very clear that anybody who wants an emergency procedure cannot be delayed. But yeah, there are other procedures that are non-emergency that could be operated on or could be conducted with less fear of spreading the virus.
Also, you spoke already about the false negatives, but see, compared to even the RT-PCR has been cited as having something as a bit of an issue with the false negatives, right? So then does this have more false negatives than the RT-PCR, or how does that work?
Yeah, this definitely has a much lower ability to detect true positives, which means a higher false negative probability than in RT-PCR. So if we look at the specific approval of the testing kit that ICMR has just announced, only about 50 to 84% of true positive cases can be detected with this test. So it's much less accurate in detecting positive results than the RT-PCR.
India is not even the first nation to use this test. Karishma says many countries have already approved it and have been using similar tests to track the spread of the virus.
Other countries have also started approving this type of test kit. US, their Food and Drug Administration, also authorized the same type of test kit on May 9th. Japan did the same on May 13th. And there is some amount of conversation in other countries around if we were to institute home kits in the future, it would be this type of kit that we would be able to use at home. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
That's basically something then that you can buy out of a chemist store, just go home and test yourself.
I mean, we haven't really figured out what home testing is going to look like at all.
Right.
But it's just to say that, in the conversations in other countries, when we talk about home kits, it's often associated with this rapid antigen test kit.
And also, is there any kind of clarity on that cost difference between the two tests?
It's much more expensive, the RT-PCR, above 1,000 rupees at least. Whereas this test kit, the price is not completely determined yet, but it might be around somewhere between 300 to 400 rupees is what I have heard. But the price is not fully established yet.
And finally, we look at an unusual scam that has been unearthed in Uttar Pradesh. The centralization of data from schools across the state and the introduction of an app called Prerna resulted in authorities discovering something unusual. Multiple schools across the state had the same teacher, one Anamika Shukla. And even more mysteriously, she'd been working in all the schools at the same time and had submitted the same documents to get the job. We're now speaking with Asad Rehman, who reported about this scam, about how it took place. So, Asad, could you start by explaining how this controversy emerged and who is the Anamika Shukla at the center of it?
So, this controversy came out through reports in the media that there were more than 20 people who were working as Anamika Shuklas and using one set of documents to get jobs at Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas across the state, which are government-run residential schools for girls. So the government says that through the Prerna app, they came to know about this alleged fraud, and after that, a probe was launched. But because of the lockdown, the probe was delayed a bit. So what has happened is that the real Anamika Shukla, who is a native of Gonda and who had applied for a job in 5 districts as a teacher at a Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, she could not go for her counseling process because she had delivered a child at that time. So these documents were used by multiple people, out of which till now 4 have been arrested and who have told police that someone called Pushpendra, who is the alleged mastermind of the whole scam, that he took money from them in lakhs. Someone told police that he took 3 lakhs, someone told police that he took 1 lakh. So this controversy or this whole issue came out. The real Anamika Shukla went to the education officer's office and told him that she came to know through the media that her documents being used at different schools by people to get jobs. Her documents were verified and checked, and they were found to be genuine. And it was found that she was the original Anamika Shukla, whose documents were forged and used by multiple people. And then the first arrest happened in Karsanj about 10 days ago.
So, is there any kind of estimate on how many Anamika Shuklas are there and how many have been arrested so far? And also, did all of them really have that same job, this KGBV teacher job?
So, according to the state government, there are 9 Anamika Shuklas who were appointed at different KGBVs as teachers. And a teacher makes around 2,000 rupees a month at a KGBV. So there are 9 of these people who got jobs, out of which 6 went for counseling and were working at KGBV, out of which 4 have already been arrested, whereas the other 2 will be arrested soon because police already knows who those people are. On Monday, police arrested Pushpendra Singh, who's also called Raj and also called Sushil and also called Guruji, who was posted as an assistant teacher in Farrukhabad, and he is the main accused in the case. Along with Pushpendra, Anand, who is a district coordinator at the office of a basic Shiksha officer in Jaunpur, and Ramnath, a senior clerk at the BSA office in Aldoi, have also been arrested. So what they did was, first, the real Anamika Shukla, who's a native of Gonda, she had applied for a job and she cleared the job but could not go. So her documents were forged and were given to other people, and other people were also helped in their counseling process by these accused in getting the jobs. And they would work at the schools as Anamika Shuklas and would draw their salaries on a regular basis. Now, all the Anamika Shuklas who have been arrested till now, first one was Supriya Jadhav. Supriya was teaching at a school in Karsanj and she was arrested on June 6th. She comes from an extremely humble background and her father is a daily wage laborer, and says that they fell for the temptation given by main accused, the masterminds of the case. And Then the second so-called Anamika Shukla, who was working, was arrested in Mainpuri on June 12th, and she was also quite desperate for a job because her husband had died in a car crash in 2017, and she was having difficulty raising her 6-year-old son. So she was working at a KGBV in Ambedkar, whereas she was arrested in Mainpuri, which is also her hometown. Then another so-called Anamika Shukla called Babli Yadav was arrested on Sunday evening by Aligarh police, and she was working with the use of Anamika Shukla's documents, KGBV in Aligarh. Then after Babli Yadav's arrest, she also told police that her sister-in-law and another acquaintance of her are also working similarly with fake documents at a school in Prayagraj and another district in UP.
Were these women who were pretending to be Anamika Shukla really qualified for these jobs? And also, is Anamika Shukla really the only one whose documents have traveled this far across the state?
As far as these women being qualified for the job is concerned, most of them were not qualified enough for the job. Anita Devi, who was arrested from Mainpuri, who was working as an Anamika Shukla in Ambedkar, she had an MA in psychology, whereas she was teaching as a science teacher at the KGBV. And Anamika Shukla's documents are not the only ones. It seems now it's come to light that there is another person, or not a person, named Preeti Yadav, who had applied for a job at Kasturba Gandhi Vidyalaya in 2017, whose documents have also been used at a school in Jaunpur and at a school in Azamgarh. So it's not just Anamika Shukla. Initially, it was just Anamika Shukla, but as the investigation has gone forward, more names have come to light that others were also cheated in a similar manner.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show, as always, was edited and mixed by our producer Joshua Thomas. If you like the show, then do subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating or review. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet to us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.